When it comes to watching movies, one thing is mostly consistent. There are always those key scenes that leave the strongest impression on viewers. These memorable moments not only capture the audience's attention, but also play a significant role in shaping the emotional impact and overall meaning of a film. Whether it's through dialogue, visuals, dramatic plot twists, specific events stick with us long after the credits roll. It could be something monumental and spectacular, or it could be something minimal and simplistic. It really all comes down to personal preference. But what about the moments that don't make it into the finalized product? Many of our favorite movies and film franchises as a whole have cut scenes that could have altered the way we thought of a character or even the entire story being told. Godzilla is no exception to this. For every iconic moment the King of the Monsters has had, there are countless others that never made their way to the big screen that leave you wondering what could have been. Today, we'll be diving into a handful of these scrap moments and answering one simple question: keep it or delete it? What better way to start off this video than by discussing the granddaddy that started it all, the original Godzilla from 1954. Honestly, it's hard to look back at this one and think it could have gone any differently, because most of what was shot by director Ishiro Honda and special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya wound up making it to the finalized film. However, there was in fact one moment that, had it been added, could have changed quite a bit about the nuclear leviathan, that being Godzilla's original reveal on Oto Island. As we've all seen in the movie itself, the island's emergency alarm is rung by a native and everyone present heads towards the hilltop to see what has been causing this much chaos throughout the area, and it's unveiled to be none other than the King of the Monsters looming over the hillside. But in this deleted scene, Godzilla is seen to be consuming what appears to be the corpse of a cow. It's stated that the reason it went unused was because Eiji Tsuburaya felt the effect didn't look very believable, since in order for audiences to even see the cow at all, it would need to be beefed up in scale, which would have contradicted the proportions set for Godzilla. Instead, the reveal was reshot and replaced with the one we see in the film today. So now that we all know that, one thing remains to be decided. Do we keep it or do we delete it? Honestly, I think Tsuburaya made the right call by cutting it. I mean, use your eyes here, that's a pretty damn big cow. Jokes aside, if there was no way of pulling off the special effect in convincing fashion, then there was no point in the crew even trying to include it. Thematically though, it would have made sense since it was already suggested that sacrificial offerings were made to Godzilla according to Oto Island's folktales. Had this idea been utilized, portrayals of Godzilla going forward could very well have had more footage of the Big G feasting on animals and potentially human beings. The most we've ever seen from Toho's Godzilla is him biting onto people but never eating them. I don't think seeing that side of the character was really necessary. Godzilla's already terrifying enough as a walking nuclear catastrophe, so explicitly showing him devouring living creatures feels a bit excessive. The biggest downside of this whole thing, however, is that no footage of the cow scene exists anymore, or at least hasn't been found yet. All that's been discovered is a still image of the moment and concept art depicting it. While this scene itself wasn't essential in conveying Godzilla's monstrous nature, it really is a shame that only our imaginations can truly picture how this could have played out on the big screen. Destroy All Monsters is one of those Godzilla films that, while perfectly enjoyable, feels a lot like a giant victory lap for the franchise at the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired in certain areas. One aspect the movie absolutely delivers on, though, is its massive roster of kaiju. In fact, it features more monsters than any other entry from the Showa era. While there were a few who didn't make the cut, nearly every major creature Toho had introduced up to that point appears in some form, which was honestly an impressive accomplishment for a film released back in 1968. Spoilers for this 58-year-old movie, but the Earth is invaded by the Kweer aliens, and all of the monsters end up being mind-controlled by them as a part of their master plan to conquer the planet. Each one is sent to destroy various cities and landmarks all across the globe, before finally having Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Manda converge in Tokyo. Because where else would they all end up anyway? This mayhem would ultimately be where our next cut scene occurs. During the commotion between the four kaiju and the Japanese Special Defense Forces, Godzilla would target Manda and have a little scuffle with the serpent. Most of the footage is just Godzilla flailing Manda all around, as if he was late on his rent payment.
Man, where's my money?
This altercation was never originally in the script and was entirely improvised by legendary Godzilla suit actor Haru Nakajima. The scene, as you could have already guessed, was shelved. Now if I were in charge of this film, would I keep it or delete it? I'm gonna be frank here. No, not like that. But as fun as it is to see this little scuffle between Godzilla and Manda, I wouldn't have put it in the film either. Let me explain. At this exact moment, it wouldn't have made much sense. All the kaiju were currently under the mind control of the Kweer aliens, and their primary objective was to decimate Tokyo. So having Godzilla randomly stop and attack another controlled monster feels a bit counterproductive. It clashes with the internal logic the movie had already established. You could have had them do this exact thing earlier on in the movie during the whole Monster Island scene and it wouldn't have felt too out of place. But during this coordinated attack on Tokyo? I don't think so. An enjoyable interaction for sure, but one that would have contradicted what the plot had already set up. Maybe one day we'll see a real on-screen fight between these two. Ah yes, Godzilla vs. BIOLLANTE. This is one of my personal favorites from the Heisei era of Godzilla films. It has a fun batch of characters who all feel relevant within the plot, the special effects sequences are very well crafted, especially ones with BIOLLANTE, who is one of the more imaginative kaiju in the Godzilla series, and I'm also a big advocate for the film's score composed by Koichi Sugiyama. One day I'll definitely dive deeper into this installment, because I have a lot to say about it. That being said, if you were to ask me to name off the top of my head the Godzilla movie with the most deleted footage, Godzilla vs. BIOLLANTE would probably be the first one that came to mind. When doing research for this topic, this was the film that gave me more than enough material to work with. It's no exaggeration when I say that the crew behind this entry had a lot of very ambitious ideas. Where do I even begin? There's the cut stop motion sequence with Godzilla fighting off various tendrils produced by BIOLLANTE, the unique POV shot of Godzilla from BIOLLANTE's perspective, or the more out there instance of BIOLLANTE using her final attack to consume a weakened Godzilla while sacrificing her own life in the process. But the one I want to draw attention to would have happened in the aftermath of Godzilla's first encounter with BIOLLANTE at Lake Ashinoko. Godzilla is shown to be too powerful for this rose form BIOLLANTE and sets her ablaze with the atomic breath. As a result, she burns into ember spores that release into the air. The cutscene starts with those same pollen spores showering onto the countryside nearby, which causes flowers to blossom all around the area. Godzilla takes one long look at the scenery, and then slowly but surely leaves Lake Ashinoko behind. Apparently, from what I could find, the primary reason stated for this scene's removal was due to the crew believing the flowers looked too out of scale when compared to Godzilla, and that the moment itself felt too whimsical. Yet, even though that was their initial reaction to it, would this be a scene to keep or delete? You know what? I would have left it in the final cut. It's a uniquely beautiful yet haunting moment that could be interpreted in several different ways. In any other situation akin to this, Godzilla marches forward and continues the onslaught, but instead appears to be almost fascinated by the newly formed floral landscape following BIOLLANTE's defeat. The nuclear beast seems more reflective here, showing that there's more to these kaiju than just pure destruction alone. Dr. Shiragami says it best: the real monsters are the scientists who created these giant behemoths. Can it be looked at as too whimsy? To a degree, but that's what makes it work in my eyes. Plus, it's not too far-fetched from the other pieces of imagery this flick has to offer. Speaking of, as much as I enjoyed this entry from the Heisei series, you can't tell me these quote-unquote oversized flowers are where Koichi Kawakita and the special effects crew drew the line, because Godzilla's size itself in this installment really comes into question and almost feels inconsistent at times. Humongous flowers spawned by the pollen spores from a gigantic rose monster in a movie where two giant titans duke it out should have been the least of their concerns. But I digress. My oh my, the conclusion to the Heisei era of Godzilla films. For many fans within the Godzilla community, Godzilla vs. Destroyah is the absolute peak of the franchise. I mean, even its Rotten Tomatoes score is insanely high. Now, do I agree with the fanfare this one gets? Not necessarily, but there's no denying the film is packed with strong ideas. My favorite being how the antagonist Destroyah has ties to Dr. Serizawa's weapon that defeated the original Godzilla in 1954. Hence the name of the character being Destroyer. It's a brilliant way to bring the series full circle and reconnect the Heisei timeline with the franchise's humble beginnings. Oh yeah, and Godzilla's dying. What could possibly go wrong? Well, to the surprise of basically no one, largely due to Toho's own marketing of the movie, Godzilla dies. But two separate endings were actually filmed for this climactic finale. The first is the version we all know. After a brutal battle, the JSDF uses its freezing weaponry to blast Destroyah out of the sky, sending the creature crashing to the ground and finally ending the threat once and for all. Then they redirect those same low-temperature weapons toward Godzilla in a desperate attempt to contain his meltdown as the king of the monsters slowly fades away. The alternate ending, however, plays out a bit differently. Destroyah survives the initial attack and rises back up to continue fighting. Seeing an opportunity, the military unleashes its freezing weapons on both monsters simultaneously. Godzilla then tears Destroyah apart himself before finally succumbing to the meltdown moments later. The former of these two was chosen by Toho, as they felt the latter distracted from the built-up climax revolved around Godzilla's death. So do we keep it, or delete it? If I'm being honest, this ending would still remain deleted. I know some fans would have preferred seeing Godzilla get the definitive win, but keeping the focus entirely on his final moments was far more poignant. That's why the scene remains so memorable and emotionally devastating to this day. Had the alternate ending been used instead, I don't think it would have carried nearly the same weight as the one we know of today. Even if you preferred the scrapped ending, it was still used for the manga adaptation, and I will say, it does look pretty brutal in art form. But simply put, pushing Destoroyah out of the spotlight before the grand finale gave Godzilla's passing the intended impact it deserved. Throughout Godzilla's 7-year existence, there have been various different interpretations and tones for the character. But if there's one movie where you can go in, completely turn off your brain, and just ride the adrenaline rush, Godzilla Final Wars easily takes the cake. For its entire 125-minute runtime, it feels like you're on an intense roller coaster ride. Just non-stop chaos between the kaiju and human scenes. It's just insanely over the top in the best way possible. I think it's safe to say that this is the closest we'll ever get to having a Super Sentai-esque Godzilla film. Just take a gander how wildly insane these fight scenes are. And it's not just the human cast either. The kaiju sequences are just as nutty. Godzilla is shown off to be a ruthless, unstoppable killing machine from the moment he is awoken by the crew on the Gotengo. Just about every other kaiju that crosses paths with him meets the same fate, except for 3, Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar. They all try taking on Godzilla at Mount Fuji, but are swiftly defeated yet spared by the King of the Monsters. However, this wasn't always going to be the case. For the longest time, there was a promotional image floating around where Godzilla is shown to be using what appears to be the atomic breath attack to essentially vaporize the trio once their battle concluded. Many believe this moment was storyboarded but never filmed. That theory would eventually be proven false because the deleted scene would find its way onto Japanese home media in the form of a Blu-ray bonus feature, albeit without completed visual effects. But as you can clearly see, Godzilla was originally slated to add these 3 to his kill count. According to reports, Toho just didn't want to destroy any of the suits so they could continue to be used for future promotional work. That and the filmmakers weren't too keen on the idea of Godzilla exterminating some of his longtime allies. Now, if that being said, is this a scene that I would keep or delete? This may ruffle some feathers out there, but this should have stayed in the film. Like I mentioned before, Godzilla massacres every single monster he comes across in this entry. No one is safe. So why should these 3 be spared? Because of their history and prior installments in the franchise? That logic shouldn't matter a whole lot here, as we are never explicitly shown that this Godzilla is allied with any of these 3 monsters within this continuity. On the technical side of things, Toho wouldn't have even needed to destroy the suits to pull this effect off. They could have easily layered a CG explosion or some other visual effect over the pile of defeated monsters and implied their devs that way. Simple solution. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. If you're going to make Godzilla feel like an unstoppable slasher villain, you might as well let him finish the job he already started. It's only right that we touch upon at least one of the MonsterVerse flicks within this video, and we might as well look at the film that opened the doors for this cinematic universe, Gareth Edwards' Godzilla from 2014. I've already briefly shared my thoughts on this film once before in a video where I discussed the importance of human drama within these types of movies, which you can still check out by clicking the card in the upper right hand corner, and while I don't want to linger on that aspect too much, all I'll say is this. This is still the best movie the MonsterVerse has to offer. Kong Skull Island is a close second, but not by much. Now, whether you agree with that statement or not is an entirely different story. However, I think it's safe to say that we all remember the hype and build-up around this movie being completely out of this world. After 10 long years without a Godzilla movie, the members of this community were dying to get a taste of another. Everybody ate up all the bits of news that came out during pre-production, as well as all of the on-set photos that surfaced online. One piece of information that was released around this time which had the fanbase even more ramped up was that longtime Godzilla series actor Akira Takarada was cast in the film. I even made a short video of it back in the day too. His role was more or less a glorified cameo, but having the man who had been a part of Godzilla's history from the very beginning show up in this film at all was seen as such a nice gesture. Legendary Pictures clearly understood the significance too, even publicly sharing a photo of Gareth Edwards standing beside Takarada after the filming of his scene. And seeing him in the final movie was genuinely special, is what I would be saying if the scene had been completely cut. According to Gareth Edwards, the film underwent test screenings where the studio pushed to tighten the runtime, which reportedly led to several small scenes being removed. Unfortunately, Takarada's cameo ended up on the chopping block. Petitions and such were made to try and get it back in the final cut, but alas, none of them prevailed. For years it felt like this cameo would never see the light of day. Then, in 2024, thanks to the folks over at Toho Kingdom, the Godzilla community finally got their first glimpse at the deleted scene, before it later appeared officially on the MonsterVerse 5 film 4K collection. The moment had Aaron Taylor Johnson's character Ford Brody arrive at the Tokyo airport where he'd be greeted by a customs officer played by the main man himself, Akira Takarada. He'd ask what the nature of the visit was, and Ford Brody would simply state that it was a family affair, because that wacky dad of his just had to go and get into more legal trouble. If only he knew a good lawyer. I don't even need to go on the whole spiel here, because if I were Legendary Pictures, this would have been left in the final cut. This scene barely lasts 30 seconds, and I imagine it wouldn't have caused any harm to the pacing of this film. The cameo wasn't important because of what happened in this scene, it mattered because of who was in it. The moment could have served as a subtle passing of the torch from one generation of Godzilla films to the next. Instead, its removal left many fans disappointed, especially after Legendary had already acknowledged Takarada's involvement publicly. The online backlash to that was pretty harsh if I'm remembering it correctly.
Yo, you are gonna, I guarantee it! I am gonna you!
In hindsight, it's even more ironic considering Ford Brody himself never returned for any of the sequels and has essentially vanished from the MonsterVerse altogether. Maybe keeping this scene in the film wouldn't have changed audiences' opinions on the character, but it certainly would have earned the movie a little extra goodwill from longtime fans. Either way, one thing remains certain. Akira Takarada's cameo absolutely deserved to stay in the final film, and it's a shame it took a decade for the world to finally see it. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this look at some of the more intriguing deleted scenes throughout Godzilla's 70+ year history. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my picks and opinions, or even if there are any cut moments I missed that you'd like to see covered in a future follow-up. And trust me, deleted scenes are only scratching the surface when it comes to lost or unused Godzilla media. We've already covered scrap monsters like the Demon Beast Boggin and bizarre script outlines like Bride of Godzilla. To hear more about these discarded concepts, click the videos on screen. Until next time, take care everyone, and I'll see you down the road.